My name is Bill Kavanaugh. I'm actually a farm business advisor with NOFA Vermont. I'm volunteering today, hosting remotely. I offered to come down, but they would only fly me business class and wasn't working for me. So you are attending Making Sustainable Farming Worth Your While with Liza Crawford. I'm really excited about this one. But before we jump in, I just have a few details I want to review with everybody. So there's the next slide. Okay. NOFAMAS just working on sort of healing the destruction caused by colonization. We appreciate your support, solidarity, and continued learning in this regard. To learn more and honor those whose lands you now occupy, visit this link right down here, native-land.ca. Also recognizing that our agricultural system is built on stolen land and the forced labor and exploitation of stolen Black, Indigenous, and other peoples of color. Our conference aims to help address this harm and bring equity to the food system. There's a couple of really cool BIPOC and White Ally Caucus groups happening this weekend. Today, 1 to 2 in the Sheehan Hall. So, as always, want to thank our sponsors, partner level sponsors here, all these really awesome companies, as well as our supporter level sponsors. And we definitely encourage you, they help make the conference possible. Purchase from them when you can. And when you do, let them know you really appreciate their support of NOFAMAS. And we have a very excellent winter conference auction. So it's going on, I believe, all weekend. I should know the details, but I don't off the top of my head. But definitely go to that website, check out what's on there, and bid early and bid often. So there will be a survey at the end. But so basically, I've done my spiel. I'm going to turn it over to Liza. I have a little bio for Liza here, which is in the early 2000s. Liza Crawford began making cheese in a 7 by 15 foot commercial cheese factory in her garage and selling it at the local farmer-run farmers markets. For the next 15 years, she and her husband, David Porter, made cheese, acquired a farm, goats, chickens, pigs, and on and on. After retiring, they took care of his elderly mother in their home, and after her death, moved to Massachusetts to be closer to their grandchildren, all the while pondering the meaning of their farming adventure and how the farm and the food they made there all interacted with the larger economy. Neither of them are economists, and yet they have read and talked and thought a lot about this subject. They've at least developed some axioms about the economics of farming, which they want to share with other farmers to start a conversation about what impact individual farmers can have on the larger world. So with that, Liza, take it away.
So this is an outline of what I'm going to talk about, and it's kind of a personal history of a small farm with an attitude towards how it fits into the whole world, the universe, and stardust. You all know that. My husband and I ran this farm for 15 years in Argyle. We use it as an example of how the larger economics of the world interacted with our own little microeconomics. I'm going to suggest a few axioms and how we made our way through the first few years to actually turn a profit as we went along. Wasn't a lot of profit. I don't want to misrepresent myself. We did manage to do that. But to start though, I wanted to think, as I've been thinking and talking about the topic, I've been dreaming about how it would be to farm without economics constantly impinging on the farm. Taking care of the animals, making chains, selling at the market, looking out over our beautiful green pastures. It was such a beautiful place. I couldn't even tell you. There's some of our beautiful goats. Watching the sun go down, we had an amazing view. Sunsets were just world class. And Let's just think about it for a minute. What would you do differently about farming if you didn't have to have a business plan? You know? Just think about it for a second. And try to hold on to that in your mind while I talk. We're going to hear about some things you need to watch out for in your own operation. But the economics demand that you really do have to have something more filtered. Part of the problem of the economics of farming is our own expectations. You know, is wanting to farm the same as wanting to take a monastic view of poverty, a vow of poverty? Yeah, sort of. And there are obviously non-monetary returns, and you can't really be commodified those. You can't really, it's hard to monetize those. We tried to monetize them, and actually we're fairly successful, but you still have to pay the bills and have something left over. It's not unreasonable to hope for health insurance in retirement, or even to make more than 25 cents an hour. But, it's one of the paradoxes of farming is that we do have this wonderful non-monetary returns, but you still have to pay the bills. The world does demand that. That's us when we were farming. You can tell this is actually 15 years ago. And I had short hair at the time. So that is me, actually. Who unfortunately couldn't be with us today because he's looking after grandchildren. Not unfortunately. I mean, it's too bad he can't be here because he'll barely gets. Okay, so David's mother's family produced beets industrially in upstate New York since the Depression. Many of us in our generation were just maybe one generation from the farm. But David didn't farm himself. He had lots of negative discussion and feedback about farming as a child. Once we decided that we were going to farm, his family was so sarcastic and negative about it. They were like, what about uplifting? But as we went along, they came around. They saw that our way of farming was really different than their way of farming. And they saw that it could be done. David also had worked in factories. He spent years recycling industrial solvents. He spent a year in a foie gras factory, industrial farming at its worst. He did silver and paint recycling, and then he became a painting contractor, which he did for 20 years. He developed building, woodworking, plumbing, electrical, and mechanical skills, without which our farm would have sunk out of sight without a trace. That's his history. For myself, I was a dairy farming tourist as a child and youth. In other words, my family's had very good friends who were farmers. We went there all the time in the summers. We went there for vacations. We were there a lot. But as I'm sure anyone who's grown up on a farm knows, that however closely you watch, that really doesn't prepare you for having your own farm, right? It's really a different thing to actually be doing. At the age of 30, I figured out what I wanted to do when I grew up and worked as a family practice physician assistant for 23 years before farming, and for another 7 years during and after farming. And without this medical knowledge and experience, we would have been at the mercy of our own or the animals' illnesses and injuries. And also, the cleanliness reflexes that I developed doing medicine really helped with cheesemaking. The HMO I was working at in Saratoga Springs, New York, went out of business in 2000. And after that, I only found a half-time job, and I needed work to. So my mother died in 2001 and left us a small inheritance with which we built a barn, garage, woodshop, storage building. And at our ex-urban home in Saratoga Springs, I started to make and sell pressed flower crafts at the farmers market, and so I started sort of working my way in on the edge of the farmers market ecosystem, and noticed that they didn't have any dairy at the farmers market. I have this in red because you have to watch out for what you say when you think I can do that. Yeah, well, then I went to a conference like this, and I attended a wonderful cheesemaking talk, and I thought, wow, that sounds so interesting. I could do that, and that we could do value added, and we could, we could do our instead of we can use this as kind of a bridge to retirement. So, yeah. I took a 2-day course in cheesemaking. I read some books. Everybody said, really, just start. Find some milk. You got to have raw milk. So finding raw milk is a little challenge sometimes. But they said, just start. And so I did. The farmers market was very excited at the thought of having dairy. So there was a lot of kind of agitation and emotional support from the farmers market. So that was pretty uplifting. We built this 7x14 cheese factory, the world's smallest cheese factory. Actually, it was the smallest, but it is. It still holds the record, I think, of being the smallest cheese making facility in New York State. A word about inspectors. Our dairy inspectors were very helpful. Do not alienate your inspectors. If you're in a situation where you have to be inspected, love your inspector, no matter what happens, because they can be very helpful, and they can really be a problem if you're their inspector. So it's your most charming self, and they're there. And also do everything right. I mean, that's the other thing. The inspectors are there so that the public to guard the public against cheese. Cheese can be really wrong. So their mentality is one that you never focus on. We took inventory of our skills and resources, which were extensive. We had each other with very complementary other skills from our life history skills. The medical knowledge and skills, reflexes of cleanliness and sanitation, that construction and machinery skills, which I also developed. We have the confidence of later adulthood. We can't say enough about that. I could never. I really respect you guys that are going into this new movie. I could never have done it before I was 50. So that's great. I have an IRA, which we actually did tap a couple of times. We owned our house in the exurbs of Saratoga, which enabled us to buy the farm. Without that, without having all these things behind us, we would have had a hard time. We both had ability to connect dots and draw conclusions, which is also communication. And we had people skills, which were very helpful at the market. But there was so much we didn't know. So much. Actual farming skills, animal handling skills, so much we didn't know about relating to and negotiating with farmers. When our first milk providers became unreliable within a few months, we were really puzzled. We couldn't figure out what had happened. Now I understand perfectly what had happened. But at the time, we were like, I guess we'll have to buy a farm. So that was another thing. We have to watch out for that. We could do that. We knew we wanted to be near infrastructure, but we weren't exactly sure what we meant. We were lucky and found it, but I can't say that it was exactly to the root. We had to have a farm before. We knew we wanted to farm goats by that time, so we needed pastures and brush. And so here's our farm history. Found this 200-year-old house that needed to be totally redone, and so we did. For the barn, so we did. And all the while, admiring the western view, we had to prepare for the goats, which arrived 10 days after we moved in a snowstorm in the middle of December. It was not really very, it wasn't very auspicious, but that actually turned out really well. So there we have these goats. Do we know about goats? you have to watch the goats they'll teach you. They're great. I mean, for me, goats were the perfect animal. Cows would have been too big. So we moved in December. Unfortunately, we had to wait till the inspector was happy before we started making cheese. But fortunately, we had a good stock of cheese that I had made before shutting down the other cheese room, which incidentally became a sauna in our suburban house. The people who moved in made it into a sauna. So it's got a drain in the floor, you know, it's insulated. And so we realized that we had to do something to make our farm, you know, if not profitable, at least float. And actually, our banker was so funny. We just happened to walk into First Pioneer Farm Credit because we saw it by the roadside, you know, as we were driving around. And the lady said something about how, well, the first 5 years can be really hard, but after 5 years, you're usually pretty good. And I was like, oh, we're going to make it longer than 5 years. That's great. But we did have the assets on the farm of the pastures. We had a lot of brush. A lot of it was overgrown pastures. And that is perfect for goats, 100%. We did have the goats and the goat milk. We purchased cow's milk, so we kind of became part of a couple of other farms in the area, which is kind of where one of the places that being in the infrastructure made a huge difference. We only had to go, you know, 5 miles to get as opposed to from Saratoga, we were spending an hour going back and forth. So we purchased cow's milk to make cheese, and we brought 40 to 50 laying hens. And once we had the farm sort of up and running, we had from spring to fall. We had 6 consecutive flocks of 200 roasting chickens, so 1,200 roasting chickens a year, which were actually the first thing that we had that made money. And I highly recommend roasting chickens when you're starting out because they're quick turnover, and you can make a decent profit. And you can keep from moving across your pastures, and it improves the pastures. Within a year, our pastures significantly improved. The pH had improved, grass was green. The areas where you could see the soil through had gone away. And, but you have to keep them moving because if you're out there, if they're sitting on the land for more than a day or two, they'll just destroy it. So you have to really keep them moving every day. We had 6 to 8 pigs a year. Some years 6, some years 7, some years 8. Do not ever get a whole herd of male-only pigs. Very difficult. If you don't have the females there to kind of diffuse the male energy, it is. We had one group because males do gain weight faster and they're just more profitable probably. But in our case, they were so resource intensive. You know, we had to be out there and chasing them around and stuff. The other herds that we had that were mixed or female were much easier to handle. And, much, you know, you just feed them in the morning, feed them at night. You don't have to think about it. We had variable numbers of geese and ducks for several years, and that was a delight. There were other assets of which we were not really aware. We didn't really observe these. They were received by grace, embrace, just ancestors and nature. And thinking of these helps us to be grateful and helps us have some humility and made us better stewards of our own home. It's really a good idea to take out, not only to inventory your own skills, but to inventory what's coming to you free. You know, obviously the land itself belonged to the Mohicans, and they had hunted on there for probably thousands of years. In the lower areas, they had farmed, and then they left because there were just too many people. They really just wanted to be left alone. Just wanted to be left alone. But we couldn't do that. And so we benefited from their land. So you have to of the land, just thinking about that. We also benefited in other ways, things that completely didn't have, that we just stepped into, you know. First Biden farm first gave us a mortgage at like 9.2% or something. Because it was a woman-owned business, we had other benefits. But the mortgage actually was the main one because we didn't really borrow much money. The farming infrastructure had developed for 200 years in Washington County. We benefited from that every day, and we had nothing. This was grace. There was nothing that we didn't. It just came to us. Associated with this, we are great neighbors. And the other thing I want to talk about just a little bit is farmers markets. We had 2 farmers markets. One was Saratoga and one was Glens Falls in upstate New York. These had been there for 30 years. When we first started, it was 25 years. And they had thousands of people who came to them every day, every week. And they were very successful markets, and we just stepped into them. We reaped the benefits. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but you have to keep it in mind that it's not like this is just anything you did with any luck. Now, we did start the winter markets, so now the markets go all year round. And so we kind of put in our bit, and that's important too. But the main thing is, without these assets, we never could have done that. And it's important to keep that in mind when you're thinking about economics, because economics is so cut and dry. You know, it's so flat and so and you know, it's inputs and outputs, and other than that, it's window dressing. You have to think about though the definitions of inputs. So if you have inputs and you think of it in a wide sense, you're talking about all those inputs that I just talked about. Your own assets, the assets of the farm, land, and the assets that have nothing to do with you but are part of how you manage. And again, outputs too. If you're real narrow about outputs, you're talking about things you sell. But there's so much else. You know, there's your nitrogen and phosphorus. There's your cow's flatulence. Methane comes from farming. There's lots of other outputs, and really think about all those things. You know, and which ones are we responsible for? Well, you know, you have to think widely, because without it, we get into a lot of trouble, like some of the things that are happening to us these days. We'll talk a little bit about the price of food. I'm going to talk about this actually several times as we go along. People say that farmers markets products are too expensive. I'm sure if any of you go to farmers markets or have sold at a farmers market, you've heard people go, "Oh, that's really high." But actually, food in the grocery store is too cheap. If the food in the grocery store actually costs what it costs to make, then people would go to the farmers markets and say, "Wow, that's really pretty reasonable." In most countries, people expect to pay about 20% or more of their week-to-week cash flow on food. In the US, it's about 10 to 12%. How can we have low prices and still support a decent life for farmers. We are really great farmers market enthusiasts. We were supported by the farmers markets. And since we moved to Central Mass, where there are no winter markets and few farmer-run markets, it's been very problematic finding good food, especially in the winter. Now, in the summer, we have a couple of markets in our area that are reasonable, but for people who want to buy good food, where are they? You know, the farmers, and the other thing that I want to mention is our markets were both farmer founded and farmer run. And they went year round. And farmers markets that I've been to in Central Mass are run by, you know, corporations of various sorts, or friends of the market boards or something. They really aren't farmers and they don't really have a grasp of what's going on. So you might want to think about that if you decide to go into the farmers market, because it's probably possible to, with the right kind of you know, outreach to farmers, it might be possible to change that. And I would be all in favor of it, because the markets in this area are difficult. So why is the price of food so low? There's a very simple reason. It's Nixon World Bus. Great term, what a great name, don't you think? World Bus. This guy was the agriculture secretary under President Nixon. Well, they decided that in order to keep President Nixon in office, the price of food had to be lowered and kept low. So they got a system of subsidies going to, once they had this great idea, lots of corporate farmers had lots of ideas how to do this to their profit. And of course, those are enshrined in the food bill, in the farm bill every 5 years. So it's not a great slide. But you're all familiar with this, I'm sure. Top is oil and sugar, little tiny, a little bit of meat, poultry, fish, dry beans, eggs, and nuts. All this little bit. Dairy over here, very small. But you're supposed to have fruits, and lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of grains. Then when you go over to this other one, you have the subsidies actually. Livestock, dairy, fish, and food is actually half of the subsidies. So this little section here, you got half the subsidies. And this down here, this ribbon, that's fruits and vegetables. Come on, guys. Saying that we should eat this, 5 times a day. Now, if you mulch your corn and soybeans, which is what this is, with dollars year after year, you're going to have distortions. Anyway, the other thing that this doesn't show, which I think the next one does, is biofuels. So biofuels, by the way, aren't food. They're biofuels. And, so this one, the way this one breaks it up, I think this was it's still half of it, plus it was the exports. And its vegetables are this little section here. So section. So you know, they aren't walking the walk. They're talking the talk. They're not walking the walk. Since there was suddenly a lot of corn and soybeans, scientists went to work to find uses for these and discovered high fructose corn syrup, which they started doing everything. This was one of the factors causing an epidemic of obesity with all its attendant woes, causing this medical system to buckle under the strain. In 15 years, from 2004 to 2019, farming income, especially for small farms, dropped steadily from 2010 to 2018, according to the USDA. U.S. farm sector debt went up from 270 billion to over 400 billion. And this is mostly on the real estate. So that means that obviously farmers are using the agricultural real estate to support their debts. Another thing is dairy farmers, which are completely at the mercy of the co-ops that buy their milk. During the 14 years when we were making cheese from 2003 to 2018, it's not 14 years. But anyway, the dairy farmers we worked with got the same amount in dollars from the co-op for the milk for 14 years. As the costs rose, the payments did not. The farmers were expected to wring out more efficiency from their herds and externalize as many costs as possible. This has been a big problem for the macroeconomics in terms of the pig industry in North Carolina, right? Which has externalized its manure. I don't know if any of you know about the pig industry in North Carolina, which is it's 10,000 pigs in one farm, and when you wash the manure out, you might wash it into a lagoon. Yeah, doesn't that make you think about palm trees and the surf? No, it's horrible. It stinks, and it's toxic. And anyway, the pig industry, the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, there are a lot of things where people have been enabled and encouraged to bring out the costs and externalize what they can externalize. And that is very problematic. And it's not really something that we did, but it's something that you need to think about where you're external, where you're going to hold on to that waste so that you can make something. Now, I do remember, I always wanted to have this is another interesting story. Anyway, remember that human ingenuity can start out with the best intentions and still really screw things up. Beware of your own unintended consequences. And keep in mind that you cannot see the ends of our actions. So
The table being real.
it's not the same thing when I started. Many people seem to think that they can push on boldly into the future, but really some humility is a good thing. You need to be bold, but it needs to be tempered by humility. Another group, of course, talk about that here. The parasites and problems. The fact that all this money was pouring into the farming sector meant that all these guys began to expand and get bigger. Chemical industry really benefited from farming. Without farming, what they do with all their pesticides and all their banks have benefited, obviously. Farmers need to borrow money for these things, equipment sales, gardening, regulators are important, but they also suck money in the system. They're very important. I don't want to say anything negative about regulators, even though I'm out of the business now, and it won't have any impact on me, because regulators, if anybody is watching out for the public, it's the regulators. So you need to have some not totally negative, but don't fall into the trap. They're really the only thing, because really it's like organic farming used to be. you know, there was this kind of spiritual aspect to it. And now that we have all these regulations, the spiritual aspect maybe is a little less present. Not everybody who's doing organic farming is necessarily taking care of the spiritual aspects of it. Regulators are sort of the same way. That a lot of regulators used to be farmers, and they have to they have to make a living. They decide they want to make a living with something else, and so it becomes a success. So I can have a lot of compassion. They also are not perfect human beings. Insurance sales, that expertise is wise. Research industry, Crawford extension. Companies would be there if it weren't for farming. So really, if you have farming, if you don't have farming, if you're not supporting farming adequately, all these other critters would not be as profitable as they are. I want to talk just a little bit about the vets also. Obviously, sometimes you need your vet expertise, but you also need to think about if you're breeding animals, you need to think about what you're breeding for. You need to accept that not all animals are robust enough for dairying or even meat production. We had an adorable little goat named Sweet Pea. It was a perfect name for it. But she wasn't a great milker, but she thrived as a companion goat. So we were able to kind of place our goats other places, but you do need to think about what we were breeding for easy burden. You know, it's one of the things that we worked on. So somebody that was problematic, who we needed to help a lot, we would find a way to pass that program. And somebody who wasn't a good mover. So we were breeding for very specific things, and the more you can breed for those things, the less you need the vets. We only had the vets come once a year because we had to have a food evaluation once a year. And we had friends who were in the business of cheese making, and they had vets coming from every time. They were kidding. How could they possibly afford it? They went out of business. So anyway, in some ways, it's possible to say that this support that is given to farmers is actually support to these guys, the chemical industry, banks, computer sales, research industry. I want to say a word about Crawford Extension. Crawford Extension also, they are not perfect individuals, but they are very good-hearted people. And it's good to take their advice, but it's also good to have other advice also, because really, we need research which is unbiased by the economic considerations of the farm. For example, the economic aspects of some of the cooperative extension ideas, like get bigger or get out, and support for horizon to horizon cultivation, those were both really problematic because of what came what came along behind it. So if you don't have any hedgerows, if you're plowing from horizon to horizon, you don't have any hedgerows, you don't have any pest control. You have to pay for pest control. If you get rid of those hedgerows where the crickets and the insect-eating birds and the bees and pollinate with it, and you have to buy all those things like that. Bring bees in, you have to use pesticides along the way. So the hardened cooperative extension agents take the research in a very black and white way and they come and tell you what to do. You can see where they're coming from, but it's important not to take it all apart. And another distortion that we ran into was that as soon as the cooperative extension agents saw a way for farmers to add value, which is great, you want to add value to your products, but the cooperative extension agents would immediately start to push it out to all the farmers. So all of a sudden, you go from no cheesemakers to 8 cheesemakers in the same county. And we experienced that. It was very stressful for a while because until someone went out of business, it was you know, competition is good, but it's not the only thing. In that case, though, it's tricky because, of course, all the cheesemakers made different cheeses. So in another way, we could all price our own cheeses however we liked. I'm going to be talking about pricing today. This is not the exhaustive list of all the ways the farm business works. It gives you an idea of how one bad idea can produce lots of things. You know, this stuff is not necessarily the political activity. It's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but it is worth getting to know your state representative and your federal representative, just because you can get a lot of information from their offices. I highly recommend being friends with you, especially the state person. They're very approachable and they will be able to help you. Grants and such like. Remember that we're all perfect. Remember that the expectations that can be in line with reality. And that's an important one for them. Because otherwise you can get very Now let's have a second to get the because that's all 4 after all. It's one of our big goods springing off, springing off this pondering that we had in our farm. That's another good reason for goats. It takes your mind off the macroeconomics. Okay, now we're going to move to the farm microeconomics. Just kind of a general comment about inputs. We wanted to minimize our inputs so we didn't have to push for the maximum output. If you have the ability, and you do have the ability to reduce your inputs every year, remind yourself every day that there's no such thing as waste. How can I use this, whatever it is? We use our pigs in this way. Anybody who's going to make cheese should have pigs, because for every pound of cheese, you get a gallon of whey, which is full of good stuff. And man, pigs, the pork that you get from feeding pigs whey, we fed the chickens too. It keeps your feed bills way down, and it's just the best you can imagine. We've never found it. So you need to look at recycling waste streams. You need to remember that any waste, quote unquote, is a free input. But there is a good reason why conveniences and efficiencies have taken root in the last 50 years. Conveniences and efficiencies are a very human way to try and do more with less and get away with things. And so watch out for your conveniences and efficiencies. I'm not talking about workarounds. The workarounds that work on your particular farm are totally, I'm not talking about them as being as being a convenience and efficiency, even if they are convenience. And by the time we were getting out of farming, we could do our chores that would have taken all day. Yeah, our chores in a couple of hours. So it really, understanding your land, dealing with your animals year after year, really makes things much more efficient. But efficiencies can easily shade over into externalizing costs, and you really need to watch out for that. And also, there's a point beyond which efficiency affects your personality. We knew some very successful farmers who got there by underpaying their help, overstocking their land, washing their extra nitrogen and phosphates down in the river. And number one, these things are counterproductive in the long run. But if you're looking at money, if you're only looking at the monetary aspects, then you missing out a whole realm of ways that you can do more for less. When we started making cheese, remember the dairy cost $11 a hundredweight. When we left farming 15 years later, it was still $11 a hundredweight. It peaked for just a couple of months at $17 a hundredweight. We paid more than that because we wanted to pay our price. But we could have gotten it for less. We could have gotten it for less. And our pigs also cost $45 each at weaning when we started. And 15 years later, they still cost $45 each at weaning. It's insane. We could have pushed the farmers a bit and gotten them for less. We could have run out our costs. But why would that be the thing? $45 is something that you're going to grow to 300 pounds and charge $6 or $8 a pound for it. $5 is like such a small piece of that. Same thing if you're doing anything down the way. The same thing is true of the milk that we bought, which was the best quality milk. We would take our milk cans, we'd go there, and the milk would go right into it before it was chilled, and we bring it home, all warm and foaming, and throw it in the kettle and make cheese out. So it's possible with some, and that was more work than if we had somebody drive up in a milk truck and discharging into it. If we had been big, it would have been a very different situation. But when you're small, you have much more control over that, and really what you're paying for your raw materials is a very small part of what you're actually going to get out of it. So now let's know about price. When obviously our sales for the vast majority of our monetary output. Every season, so a couple times a year, we push prices up. Add 50 cents an ounce or something. So when you think about it, it's you need to do this periodically just to keep your prices in line with what the market will bear. You need to think about you're not really, if you're at the farmers marketplace, you're not really in competition with the grocery store. So you can have control over your prices, and you can increase them a little bit until you get some pushback. You get some pushback, then you reduce them a little bit and just stay. So every year we raise the prices, and just a little bit, maybe a nickel or a dime. The chickens we were especially effective with, actually, because people became aware that these chickens were not in competition with what you can get at the store. It's not $1.52 a pound, and at the end we were getting $6.50 a pound. And what that means, you have to be a little bit careful if you're talking to somebody new at the market, a new customer, because They say they'd like a chicken, you hand them a chicken, and you say, that'd be $36, please. And they go, sometimes their mouth just dropped it. But what we did, and it worked very well, actually, we probably did it 3 or 4 times a year. We would say, okay, I'm going to give you that chicken. You take it home, cook it, eat it. Back next week, and give me what you think it's worth. Then come back and give me the $36. So don't underprice it. You know, when somebody asks us for a wholesale price on our cheeses and meats, we used to say we're selling all we can make at the price I just quoted. Why would we give it to you for less? So, and as I said before, because all our cheeses and our eggs, roasters, and pork were all unique products, we were able to set prices with a minimal reference to commercial products. And that is kind of the crux of trying to make it as a farmer. You want to kind of disengage yourself from the grocery store, because either with a farm store or with a farmer's market store. Going along with the outputs, I want to talk about the cheese store. Oh, those are the inputs, I'm sorry. The inputs are lowered each year, but watch out for bringing out costs, because you start impinging on other farmers if you're bringing out costs. Set the price, and then you educate the public to understand why that price. And you know, once they've tasted it, they will understand. It's getting them to take the first bite. And this is easier than it was 20 years ago, because there's been lots of education since then. This is our next output. Our next output is the farm itself. And monetize a farm. You can charge for farm tours if you want to. We never did, because we were talking to people. But we did have the cheese store every week. The cheese store was 8 local, up to 8 local cheese farmers in the area. We had this event where people could drive to the farm and see the cute animals, look at pastures, and every year we had this cheese store where up to 3,000 people would come to the farm and hang out with the goats and read grass and buy cheese. We got great support from the local and regional press, as well as organizational support from the county extension. Every year we got this great boost to our bottom line. We could pay our taxes. It was at the beginning of winter, and you could pay your taxes, which is really very use your money. Another output was our dear interns. We had interns. 6 years. And they would work side by side with us for 6 months, and then went on into the wider world to carry our message of regeneration and closing circles. Not having, she went on to be an assistant goat farmer, but she also was a sailboat captain. She got her captain's license a couple of years after she did. So she does tours in Maine. But she loves goats too. So anybody who loves goats can come to our farm. Just a word about farm tours. You can charge for them, and it's probably a pretty good idea too. We probably should have. We could have improved our bottom line with that. But we feel like the educational aspect of it is sufficient to this is the farm room. This is the farmers market. We'll talk a little bit about food security, because that was one of our important outputs for us and for other people. The farmers markets continued through thick and thin, because where we have sold our farm and have sold our food, they closed. And also, the customers came through thick and thin because where would they buy their food? Once people are used to having farmers markets, they will come. If you're providing them with the products that they need. So, what kind of farming is both a solution to climate change and an important constituent of resilience. Organic is good, beyond organic is good, regenerative is good. Any one of those is better than commercial farming or modern farming. People who are going to be vegetable farmers, the same ideas about pricing go hand in hand with vegetable farming. Also, it's important to keep in mind that no carrot is just a carrot. There's all this other stuff. You have to know what you're putting into that carrot and have faith in yourself that this carrot is pretty special. And the things that you grow on a small farm, they are not, they're not just the right kind of farming is important for regional food independence. It's been there, according to the USDA, there are 500,000 acres in Massachusetts alone under 198 organic farms. That sounds like a lot of acres to me. Of course, it's a total of 6.55 million acres in Massachusetts as a whole. It's been estimated that in New York and New England, we could reach food independence by increasing agricultural acres by 1/3. Think of all the farm acres that have been allowed to go fallow. There are so many. Now, there are a lot of those that are glaciated areas, and they shouldn't be farmed, obviously, but there are lots more that just need to be reclaimed to be planted. If each farmer could increase their farm acres by 1/3, or if 1/3 more farmers could start up and get good at it, we could achieve regional food independence, which kind of blows my mind. I mean, here in New England, it's great. This obviously would require some boosting and assistance from the governments of the states, but the economics would have to be explained to customers who do not yet understand. But in any case, it's within the realm of the possible, and who knows what the future holds. So that is security. Future health and security. These are a few axioms. Customers are going to pay for their food, either the farmers not going to do the farmers' office. And if you present it that way, people suddenly realize exactly what you're talking about. But they're not. They really don't have to pay it. So, what others is what this would have done you when they do this kind of externalizing costs and bringing out your costs. You want to have some sensitivity about that. You want to be able to keep your waste streams because they're free inputs, but they also don't belong in the rivers. The problem with the current economics of farming is that food at the supermarket is too cheap. And the carrot is never just a carrot. A piece of cheese isn't just a piece of cheese. Have faith in what you've done. So that is what I have to say. And I would love to have a conversation with people. We've got 15 minutes left as to how you see the economics of things. Hopeful time.
I have a question.
What's that?
In your presentation, you were talking about the importance of what you have to do in order to get involved with the farmers market. And, I think you were saying that it was kind of like a free given fee, so maybe like the structure of it was there for you, but what, like, how was it for you to get into it?
It was thriving. It was a Saratoga market had 3,000 people every twice a week.
Wow.
And they've been there for 30 years. And gradually people had gotten used to having it there. And it was incredible. And the Glens Falls market had about 1,500 people. And, but we worked with both markets. Personally, once we got into it. And so when you say getting into it, what we did was just see what they needed and apply. And I originally applied as a craft maker, which there are craft makers in pretty much any farmers market. But if you have a good product, and you apply. Now there are fees. There's a stall fee. In our case, there was a stall fee. But the fact that we didn't have any staff or anything that the farmers did, the volunteers, everybody did something. So it was an inexpensive way for us to get started. Obviously, fees went up every year, but still was incredibly inexpensive compared to markets that are run by people who are more parasites. You can be a parasite with the best of goodwill. Just because I'm calling people parasites isn't that they're bad. It's just that they're just sucking money out of the systematically. That's
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to say this is a good time for those of you who are tuning in via Zoom to drop your questions in the chat, so we can also have them answered if you have any. Otherwise,
it's not only questions too. I mean, if people have comments.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any feedback?
Ways that this has run a bell to you.
So like earlier you sort of talked a little bit about some of the pitfalls that you experienced. And maybe, yeah, like maybe if you could talk a little bit more about that, like some things to maybe look out for, more than, things that you did, but like specifically in being in farming, I guess it's
Oh, yeah, it's been good help. That was one fun. I can't believe I left that out of the assets. We were so lucky to get different maintain through our farming experience. Many people do not get help. It's very hard to do. It's not around it. And, probably we were lucky in so many ways. So when you talk about pitfalls, I'm kind of Pollyanna. I had we had a couple really interesting experiences with local flooring stores and stuff like that. I would go in and ask for something. And the project. One of them said, no, we don't sell to anybody. So just come around this. And I said, I'm not coming in off the street. I've got a cheese factory. It's better to send a mail than I'm sorry to say. I know the market was, that was real difficult. Right. It was, I'm sure we didn't get money off it. She had terrific work. It's not only work, Sorry. Well, I wish my husband was here. So, I'm sure we could. We were really lucky. We had all those assets that I told you about. So coming in at the end of your working career is a real different thing than starting. So God bless people who spend their whole lives doing it. It's a wonderful thing. I never personally could have done it.
This is maybe a question. Let's see how well I can articulate the comment here. But I really responded to your invitation for us to sit with this idea of what it would look like if you didn't need to have a business plan.
Oh, yeah.
What would your farming experience and enterprise look like, feel like? And I suppose the question is, I'm still wrestling with that a little bit. My business plan is, okay, can I do this 2 hours a day over the course of a year? What does, and in an Excel spreadsheet, I kind of spit something out, like yes or no. But I need to wrestle with that a little bit more. I guess the question is, do you feel that your relationship to that kind of space that you needed to negotiate with your partner is that what kept you in business where others fell out? Is that your bottom line might have encouraged others to close shop, but you have just a different approach to what you were doing and what it meant to the two?
Yeah, that's kind of when I was saying, you can't monetize it. That there's stuff that's better to. So for us, doing farm tours was fun. It was recreation. I approach your question.
Yeah.
And there were lots of other things too. We thought about charging on those things. We actually, one guy called up a chef from Brooklyn. He called up and said, "Would you teach me how to do cheese?" Oh, yes, I will. But we never charge him. You could charge it. You can charge it to time of people to do. And people, and they got lots of interns. They actually probably never would do it. But the interns would some money. So we like it. In fact, at the end, school also. So, is that topic to what you?
I recognize that it wasn't maybe a useful question. It's me just sort of spinning through it in my own process here. Like, you know, what does it mean to what does success look like? And at some point, there's a lecture that spells that out for you. And I wonder if some, you know, colleagues and competitors in your area said this is just not what we were thinking would be our bottom line, so we're out. Whereas maybe you were talking about like, well, you know, that's you. We have our own experience of this and our own relationship, up full of rays of sun coming through. So this doesn't bottom line be damned to some extent, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but, you know, I feel like I talked about that. It's kind of that was the bottom line. It wasn't the IRS ever heard about it. It was people that owned the line. But yeah, just the experience of funding. You know, being in good health was important to us going in, to which we maintained our health. I mean, it's like we used to say, you know, it keeps you young at the same time that it makes you old. You know, it just made it so easy to stay in good shape and feel well and go to farmers markets and eat good food. You know, we would trade our stuff. Food bill was lower for us. At least it was lower because we were getting this incredible produce from the vegetable farmers, and they were really good. So I should tell you, non-monetary returns, which is American Frenchman. You know, French are very serious about that. She came over and they came here in the summertime. time, and we served a chicken. The pastures were full of like, herbs and stuff. And it was just incredible. Flowers, chickens ate all this stuff, which was so good. So anyway, chickens. This is the best chicken I have ever had, even in France. She was offended. She was upset. How can you have the best chicken? And she said, what did you do to it? We ran it across our fields for 8 weeks, and then we ate it. You know? I love that. Pork going down. Best chicken. Chicken food. So awesome. Anyway, that was
Wondering how do we make carbon, especially when you don't, and I appreciate that you talked about how we can make that. Some people who don't have that. And obviously, we change the system and not something. How we subsidize something. We never thought about how do we make it.
well, a couple of things. One is I mentioned just in passing. Well, so you have to have your expectations. You're not going to retire at some point. Not going to. Unless you buy it. So much. Pretty much all the farmers that we had somebody looking at. Programs that you can tap into. Best thing, well, this is something that just occurred to me a couple of years ago, which is one of the things that Crawford Extension does is it comes and gives the bill, they'll come in and size of the farm and solve it all. Improve that farm. And I think one of the most important things that we can do and should have a person who is really locked into funding stream so that they can distribute that funding stream. So the farms where they know people are doing things that are related to this funding stream. Sarah, is that Sarah? In Massachusetts?
No, it's Northeast there. Covered.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So they do a little bit of that. Again, it requires you to be very proactive in your farmers. My experience is the most exhausting. So if there was somebody actually, instead of being a parasite, there was somebody who would contribute to that problem. Because there are a lot of grants. And with 100,000-acre farms, it helps to start these things up. So that, in my mind, that would be, I wrote the plan. The Crawford Extension came to us and suggested that we have this cheese tour. There were 4 of us. We all sat around and drank a lot of coffee. And one of the things that they did was write the grant as a very small amount. It's a fun. So we got our. You know, we got portable toilets, we got the tent to go over his things. We got a couple of things like that. And once it was up and running, you know, it is a good money.
Sorry to jump in. We're actually up on our time here.
Oh, okay.
It was supposed to end minutes ago. We don't, so I would say to check the link via the chat for the links that we have, but instead, because you all are in person, first I want to thank you for everything that you shared with us, but because you're all in person, I do have a few announcements. There are some QR codes posted around the building for you to check out the evaluation if you choose to give some feedback. But Northern Mass also has their bulk order open. That QR code is also available. I saw some postings closer to the entrance. And we also have an auction going on with some incredible items to bid on. This is also online, and auction proceeds support our year-round programming and advocacy work. So if you're able to, please bid generously. But thank you all for coming and bearing with us with the technical stuff.
I could have had another 15 minutes.
Yes. So much information to share. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, Liza.
I enjoyed that. You know, I have a